Hi everyone, I'm Darshana. So I have published a few videos in Sinhala, but this one I thought of doing it in English because it's actually based on a similar video that I did in Sinhala, but it's seems it may be relevant for those who are living outside Sri Lanka and maybe who are not who don't know Sinhala. I felt that um, might be a good idea to discuss on this on in English. But so it's based on Bayes theorem, and it's a question that I had from the initial stages of this pandemic COVID-19. Um, it's actually based on some other tutorial I saw um, on YouTube. Basically a Bayes theorem based tutorial, and Bayes theorem is actually uh, one of the fundamental theorems in statistics, and it was proposed by Thomas Bayes in the 18th century, and uh, um, he was actually a mathematician as well as I guess he was a priest in England. And so what I'll do is I'll briefly go through the Bayes theorem and um, basically give a recap of that, because I guess even though most of you may have learned it in school, maybe in high school or even middle school, I feel that it may be a good idea to give a brief recap, because most of you may have already forgotten it. So yeah, and then we'll see how it can be applied to the discussion on COVID, and particularly COVID testing, right? Okay, so right. So Bayes theorem is basically it explains this idea of conditional probability and how to calculate the conditional probability, because certain things in our day-to-day life we can directly observe, like from our sensory perceptions, and we can come to some conclusion whether it's true or false, right? But there are certain things that we can't directly observe. So for such kind of things, we can observe something and then like use that as an indirect proof and calculate the conditional probability of something that we can't directly observe based on what we can observe, right? So that's basically the idea behind Bayes theorem. So if we take two events like A and B, and the probability of A being true we can denote as PA, and the probability of B being true we can denote as PB. So the Bayes theorem says that the conditional probability, this is not a division, this is just a conditional probability, that is the probability of A given B is true, right? Probability of A being true given B is true is probability of B given A multiplied by PA divided by probability of B being true, right? So this is the Bayes theorem. So the proof of this is fairly straightforward. I will quickly go through that. So if we calculate probability of A given B, it's probability of A and B divided by probability of B. Yeah. And because that's basically what it is. I mean, the probability of A being true given B being true, we can calculate as the probability of A and B being true at the same time divided by the probability of B being true, right? So if we take this one to the other side, probability of A and B is the A intersection is the A and B is probability of A given B multiplied by PB, right? So similarly we can write the base or we can write this function to calculate the conditional probability of B given A, that is probability of B intersection A divided by PA So that is probability of P and A. Yes, probability of B given A multiplied by P. Right? So these two things are actually it's the same thing, right? When you say probability of A and B or B and A, it's the same thing. It's a symmetric operator. So that means these right hand terms we can equate them. So probability of P given A, P A. Right, so we can take this one to the other side. A given B is probability of P given A multiplied by PA divided by PB. Right. Okay, so this is the base theorem. The same thing that I wrote initially. So there are a couple of terms that are relevant when we talk about base theorem. So this one is called the prior, Prior, and this is called the posterior. Right? Prior and posterior. So prior is like the initial belief that we have that some event is true. We can't directly observe it, but we have some initial belief. And posterior is after we observe something, so we observe some indirect observation and make some indirect observation, then we update our belief based on that observation. So that's what the posterior means. So prior and posterior are two important concepts attached with the base theorem, right? So right, so now we'll see how this can be applied to the COVID testing, particularly this idea of PCR testing, right? So we define A as the event that someone has COVID-19 and B as the event that the PCR test being positive, right? Because even though in commonly in the media and when we refer to COVID testing, the common notion is that if someone is positive with the test, then there's automatically there's the assumption that they have the COVID-19 infection, right? But those are two different events, right? So so we will take them as two different events. Someone actually having COVID-19 infection and the PCR test being positive, right? So we can define the prior PA. So if we assume that we do the test on just someone who we randomly pick from the entire population of a country or a society, so that will be a relatively small number, right? Because if you don't filter in anyone, those who already have symptoms, or those who have already been in contact with with someone who is already sick, right? So if we just pick someone from the entire population, so then someone having COVID will be, the probability of someone having COVID will be fairly small, right? So we'll assume that it's a fairly small number. It's still it's a reasonable number, I guess. 1 in 1000. In most countries, I guess this would be smaller than this number, but in some countries it would be higher, but relatively small number, right? So, and similarly for any test there are now, particularly for those indirect tests, there is error rate. So we can define the error rates like this. We'll say the true positive rate is 98%. That is, so these are just arbitrary numbers, right? These are not actual numbers. That is, if you do the if you take 100 people who actually have COVID, and if you do the test, 98 for 98 of them the test will be positive, and for 2 of them the test will be negative. So that's the true positive rate. And I mean, there are conflicting reports about the actual true positive rate of the PCR test, but I guess most suggestions, most suggested values are smaller than this. So these are pretty high value for any indirect test, 98%. And the true negative rate we'll define as 97%, again arbitrary value. That is, if you take 100 people who do not have COVID, and if you do the test, so for 97 people the test will turn out to be negative, and for 3 people it will falsely predict that they have COVID, right? Suppose we already know those figures, right? And if you know these figures, how can we calculate this conditional probability, right? So probability of A given B, that is given someone is tested positive, the probability of them actually having COVID-19, right? So using Bayes theorem, so we don't know that, right? But to calculate that, we can use the Bayes theorem. We can apply the Bayes theorem, and it will be PB given A multiplied by PA divided by PB, right? So this one we know that value, because what this means is, given someone has COVID-19, what's the probability that the test will turn out to be positive, right? PB given A, so that is the true positive value, right? So true positive means the probability is that given someone is already they already have COVID-19 infection, what's the probability that the test will turn out to be positive, right? That's 0.9898. This is the prior, so here the prior is 0.001. so that's, if we just select someone from the entire population, it will be a relatively small number, divided by PB. So PB is the probability that the PCR test being positive, right? We don't know that, so we'll leave it as it is. So this is 0.00098 divided by PB. This is PA, right? Likewise, we can calculate the conditional probability of not A given B. That is, if the test is positive, what's the probability that the person doesn't have COVID-19, right? Because there are only two outcomes. If the test is positive, either they can have COVID-19 or they don't have COVID-19, right? So again, we can apply the Bayes theorem here. P not A. So this is actually what this means is, given that they don't have COVID, right? They don't have COVID, but the test turns out to be positive, right? So we know that the true negative rate is 97%. That is, if someone is negative, there's a 97% chance that the test will also be negative, but there's a 3% chance that the test will be positive, right? So that is this one, 0.3, and this is the prior for someone not having COVID, right? So that is, out of the entire population, it will be a fairly high probability, right? So 0.999, that is 1 minus this value, 1 minus this prior, divided by PB. So here not A given B, so this value actually it's kind of close to 1, right? So we can assume it's 1, and I'll write it as this. So PA given B 0.00098 divided by PB, P not A given B 0.03 divided by PB. Right, so now we want to get rid of this PB term. So we know that these are the only two outcomes if the test is positive, right? So if we take another example, like Px is 1 over 3, Py is 2 over 3, x and y are the only two outcomes, only two possibilities. We can write it like this. We can say Px equals Px plus Py, right? Because Px plus Py, if they are the only two outcomes, the sum of probabilities will be 1, right? So that's 1 over 3, 1 over 3 plus 2 over 3. These 3's get cancelled out, we get 1 over 3. It's just original value of Px, right? So we can do something like this here. We can say PA given B is PA given B, PA given B plus P not A given B. So the sum of these two terms will be 1, right? So this is 0.00098 divided by PB. This value, same value goes in here. Plus 0.3 PB, right? So these PB terms, we can cancel them out. So this is 0.00098 divided by PA given B 0.00098. So we'll write the approximate value here, 0.031, right? A given B, right? So this value we can calculate 0.03 something, right? So PA given B is, we'll write the approximate value as 0.03, and P not A given B is 1 minus that value, right? That is 0.97, because those are the only two possibilities. If you think of the conditional probabilities, those are the only two possibilities, right? Or the probabilities that are there. Now what does this mean? So A is the event that someone has COVID-19, right? B is the event that someone is tested positive from the PCR test. So what this means is, if someone is tested positive, the probability that they have COVID is 0.03, and the probability that they don't have COVID is 0.97. So it's kind of counterintuitive, because after all, they are tested positive, right? The test result is positive, but this says that the actual probability that of them having COVID is a fairly small value, right? So the reason for this is this prior, right? So because the prior probability here is a fairly small value, it's a reasonable value if you think of the entire population, right? But still it's a small value, so that makes the posterior also small, right? Even if the the observation is a positive one, the posterior probability, the conditional probability, is fairly small. So the solution for this would be to increase the prior, right? Increase the value of the prior. So there may be different ways to do this. You could test for only, you could do the test only for those who already have symptoms, or who have been in contact with someone who already have symptoms and maybe tested positive. Kind of quite sure that that source is a positive, someone who is positive with COVID, right? So using those ways, you can try to increase the prior, right? But with COVID, I guess there are there are some challenges, particularly with symptoms, because the symptoms are, I guess, very generic, and there are multiple conditions, dozens of conditions that may cause the same symptoms, right? But still there may those may be the options that are available. And also you could do, I guess, do the same test multiple times, because if the posterior here is higher than the prior, right? So that means if you do the test again for only those who were tested positive, then the prior among that population will be higher, right? So you do the test again only for that population, like that. Or if you combine multiple tests, it might improve the confidence of the prediction, right? So there may be things like that you can do. But now the thing is, with community testing, again, the term community testing is a pretty vague term, because different people mean different things by that term. So if you mean that you just pick someone randomly who's driving by your from the street, who doesn't seem to have any symptoms, or you don't have any prior knowledge about their whereabouts, then the prior will be pretty low, right? Then actually, even though the test is positive, it's not that useful in predicting whether they are actually having COVID or not. And it can be a problem, I guess, because according to Bayes' theorem at least, so it can be a problem, I guess, because most of the government policies in all governments are determined by these numbers, right? The infection rates and so on, like whether there will be lockdowns or school closures or things like that. So it's I guess the prior is very important, right? But the problem is, if you do, like, if you just do the testing on some um, random person or random group of people, I guess what the Bayes theorem says is that, you know, you can't really trust that prediction, right? So, and I guess no, I'm not an expert in biochemistry or Bayesian inference. It's something that bothered me is this very high number of supposed rate of asymptomatic carriers, right, in COVID. Like, some reports claim that it's as high as 80%, while the other viral infections, like respiratory viral infections, like influenza A, influenza H1N1, or SARS virus, they seem to have much less asymptomatic carrier rate, like around 20% or even lower. So whether I was just wondering whether this difference is due to the way the testings were done, because like from the initial stages, governments around the world, they were very keen to do the so-called community testing, and whereas with these other viruses, those who were tested would have been those who are already ill and who are already in hospital, so the prior probability is very, very high. Whereas in COVID, because of the huge push from the media and from the political establishment, the more testing would have been done as community tests. Um, that's my assumption, right? Maybe whether that played a part in having very low price, and whether the actual predictions are whether how accurate they are, or whether there's any exaggeration of the amount of the number of asymptomatic carriers, right? So that's something that was bothering me. And I don't know, maybe this has been already discussed in the media, but I didn't come across that um, this particular argument in the media, in the mainstream media or the alternative media. So that's why I thought maybe it will be a good idea to discuss that. Maybe there's a better answer for that. I don't know. I will anyway have this description, this note in the description, so you can have a look, and you can post a comment if you feel that there's an error in this argument, or if you have any other ideas. Yeah, and I guess this idea of So like I said, this is a very general this is general knowledge, I guess, in the field of medical testing. But at the same time, now we see that there's a huge push for these uh, pre-screening or early screening tests done on chronic illnesses as well. It's not related to COVID, but on chronic illnesses where people are tested. I mean, they are seemingly fine, but they are tested, and if some of those tests turn out to be positive, sometimes they are even medicated, or sometimes even preventive surgeries are done. So again, I guess um, I think some more thought may have to be given into that, because the prior would be pretty low in that instance as well, because you just select someone who from the population who don't have any symptoms. So just because a test is positive, maybe it's a good idea to suggest some lifestyle changes, but uh, like doing these invasive interventions, like giving drugs or doing surgeries, whether that's the wisest thing to do. So that's something to think about. I guess there may be other justifications for that. It's just something that came to my mind. Okay, so yeah, so that's basically what I wanted to talk about, whether based on the Bayesian argument, whether the community testing is effective or even accurate, right? Would it give an accurate picture about the outbreak? Because these numbers ultimately, like I said, these numbers ultimately affect lives and affects states decisions, right? Policy decisions, right? Okay, so I will so that's basically it, and thanks for joining in, and I'll try to upload more videos in English. I'm not sure how often I'll be able to do that, but I'll try to do upload such videos if I feel that there's an audience for that. I'm not sure. And yeah, see you with another video. Thanks.